We towed with a two-wheel drive F-150 and a four-wheel drive F-150 side by side for 100,000 miles, and the winner surprised almost everyone who saw the results. I run a small hauling operation, and 3 years ago I made a decision that most truck guys thought was insane. I bought two identical F-150s, same engine, same trim, same trailer, and the only difference was one had four-wheel drive and one did not. My goal was simple: settle the argument once and for all about which setup actually holds up better when you are towing heavy loads every single day. Everyone has an opinion about this, but almost nobody has real data. Today, I am giving you that data. The fuel economy gap between these two trucks over 100,000 miles will probably shock you, and the transmission wear difference is something Ford does not talk about in any brochure. Let's get into what we found. Both trucks started with 11 miles on the odometer. Same 2023 model year, same 3.5-liter EcoBoost V6, same 10-speed automatic transmission, same 6,500-pound curb weight class before options, and the same gooseneck trailer loaded to roughly 9,200 pounds for the vast majority of our runs. The only real variable was the drivetrain. One truck sent power to the rear wheels only, the other split power between front and rear axles through a transfer case. This mattered more than most people expect, and it showed up in ways that had nothing to do with traction. The first thing we tracked was fuel economy, because this is where the biggest myths exist. Most people assume the four-wheel drive truck burns more fuel because it is heavier and has more drivetrain components spinning. That assumption is correct, but the size of the gap is what surprised us. Over the full 100,000 miles, the two-wheel drive truck averaged 9.8 miles per gallon while towing our test trailer at highway speeds between 62 and 68 miles per hour. The four-wheel drive truck averaged 9.1 miles per gallon under identical conditions, identical routes, identical trailer weight, and identical drivers rotating through both trucks, so driving habits could not skew the numbers. That's a 7.7% fuel economy penalty for the four-wheel drive system while towing. Over 100,000 miles at an average diesel and gasoline blended fuel cost of $3.60 per gallon during our test period, that difference amounted to roughly $2,900 in additional fuel spent on the four-wheel drive truck. The extra weight of the transfer case, front differential, and additional driveline components adds approximately 250 to 300 pounds to a four-wheel drive F-150 compared to its two-wheel drive counterpart. That weight has to be moved every single mile, and under heavy trailer load, the engine works harder to compensate. There is also parasitic drivetrain loss. Even when the four-wheel drive system is in two-wheel drive mode on models with a part-time transfer case, or operating in an automatic all-wheel drive mode on models with a full-time system, there is rotational mass and friction in the front differential and front drive shaft that simply does not exist on a two-wheel drive truck. This friction translates directly into fuel burned that produces zero forward motion benefit. Braking and stopping distance under load was our second major test category, and this is where we expected the four-wheel drive truck to have an advantage. It didn't, at least not in the way people assume. Both trucks used the same factory brake package rated for the same gross combined weight rating. Stopping distance from 60 miles per hour while towing our 9,200-pound trailer averaged 187 feet for the two-wheel drive truck and 191 feet for the four-wheel drive truck across 40 controlled stops on a closed test surface. The difference comes down to the additional unsprung weight at the front axle of the four-wheel drive truck. That extra rotational mass at the front wheels means slightly more energy the braking system has to dissipate. It's a small difference, 4 feet on average, and probably not something you'd notice in daily driving, but under emergency braking scenarios with a loaded trailer, every foot matters. What did matter significantly was traction during braking on wet and gravel surfaces. The four-wheel drive truck showed measurably more stability during hard braking on loose gravel, with less rear-end sway from the trailer pushing forward into the hitch. This is one of the clearest advantages four-wheel drive provided, and it's worth remembering as we get further into the results. Transmission wear was the category that generated the most debate among our team, and it's also the category Ford's marketing materials never mention. We pulled transmission fluid samples every 15,000 miles from both trucks and sent them to an independent lab for particulate analysis. The 10-speed automatic in the four-wheel drive truck showed consistently higher friction material particulate counts starting around the 45,000-mile mark. By 90,000 miles, the four-wheel drive truck's transmission fluid showed particulate levels roughly 22% higher than the two-wheel drive truck's fluid at the same mileage interval. This isn't necessarily a flaw in the four-wheel drive system itself. It's a byproduct of the additional load the transmission experiences when power is being split and managed across a transfer case, particularly during launch from a stop with a heavy trailer attached. The two-wheel drive truck's transmission only has to manage torque delivery to the rear axle. The four-wheel drive truck's transmission, even when the transfer case is in two-wheel drive mode, still experiences slightly different load characteristics due to the additional rotational mass connected to the output shaft. At 100,000 miles, we had both transmissions inspected by a certified Ford transmission specialist. The two-wheel drive truck's transmission showed normal wear consistent with its mileage and duty cycle. The four-wheel drive truck's transmission showed clutch pack wear that the specialist rated as roughly one service interval ahead of what he'd expect from a two-wheel drive truck at the same mileage. Neither transmission had failed or showed signs of imminent failure, but the data suggests the four-wheel drive truck's transmission is working measurably harder over the same towing duty cycle. Front differential and driveline maintenance costs told an even clearer story. The two-wheel drive truck, by definition, has no front differential, no front drive shaft, no transfer case, and no locking hub mechanisms to maintain. Over 100,000 miles, our maintenance costs for the two-wheel drive truck's driveline totaled $340, almost entirely rear differential fluid changes at the recommended 60,000-mile interval. The four-wheel drive truck required front differential fluid changes, transfer case fluid changes, and at 78,000 miles, a front differential seal replacement after we noticed fluid seepage during a routine inspection. Total driveline maintenance cost for the four-wheel drive truck came to $1,180 over the same 100,000 miles. That's a difference of $840 purely in maintenance costs tied to the extra hardware required for four-wheel drive. This doesn't mean the four-wheel drive system is unreliable. Both trucks completed the full 100,000 miles without a single driveline failure that stranded us on the road. But it does mean the four-wheel drive system carries a real ongoing cost that most buyers don't factor in when they're standing on a dealership lot deciding which box to check. Tire wear was another area where the two trucks diverged. The two-wheel drive truck wore through its rear tires noticeably faster than its front tires, which makes sense given that all the power and most of the trailer tongue weight transfer happens at the rear axle. We replaced the two-wheel drive truck's rear tires at 52,000 miles and again at 96,000 miles. Front tires on the two-wheel drive truck lasted the full 100,000 miles with tread remaining. The four-wheel drive truck showed much more even wear across all four tires because power delivery, even in two-wheel drive mode, subtly changes weight transfer characteristics, and because the front differential adds a small amount of drag that evens out the workload between axles during acceleration. The four-wheel drive truck needed a full set of four tires at 68,000 miles, and the second set was still within usable tread depth at the 100,000-mile mark. When you run the math on total tire spending over 100,000 miles, the two-wheel drive truck cost us $890 in tire replacements. The four-wheel drive truck cost $760. This is one category where four-wheel drive actually came out ahead, primarily because of that more even wear pattern across all four contact patches. Now let's talk about the scenario everyone wants to know about: traction in adverse conditions while towing. This is where four-wheel drive earns its reputation, and our data confirms it deserves that reputation. We deliberately took both trucks through wet grass boat ramps, muddy job site entrances, and one memorable snowstorm in the mountains while towing our test trailer. On a wet concrete boat ramp with roughly a 12% grade, the two-wheel drive truck struggled to get traction, pulling the loaded trailer up the ramp on 3 separate attempts, requiring us to add wheel weight or use a different approach angle. The four-wheel drive truck pulled the same trailer up the same ramp under the same wet conditions without any wheel slip on all attempts. In the mountain snowstorm, we towed both trucks over a 20-mile stretch of interstate that had roughly 2 inches of accumulated snow with intermittent ice patches. The two-wheel drive truck required tire chains to maintain safe forward progress on a grade section, while the four-wheel drive truck completed the same stretch without chains, though we did reduce speed significantly for safety. This is the single clearest advantage the four-wheel drive truck demonstrated over the entire test. And if your towing regularly takes you into snow, mud, wet boat ramps, or unpaved job sites, this advantage alone might outweigh every fuel economy and maintenance cost disadvantage we measured. If you're finding this breakdown useful, go ahead and hit that like button now, because we're about to get into the payload and stability results, along with our final verdict on which truck actually makes more sense for most towing situations. Payload capacity and trailer stability were nearly identical between the two trucks on paper, but real-world behavior told a slightly different story. The two-wheel drive truck's payload rating came in about 130 pounds higher than the four-wheel drive truck's rating, simply because the four-wheel drive hardware itself eats into the truck's total weight budget before you add a single pound of cargo or passengers. This meant our two-wheel drive truck could technically carry slightly more payload in the bed while staying within its gross vehicle weight rating. Though in practical towing situations with our 9,200-pound trailer, this 130-pound difference never became a limiting factor. Trailer sway behavior was measured using both trucks pulling the same trailer at 65 miles per hour through a series of lane change maneuvers designed to induce sway. The four-wheel drive truck recovered from induced sway slightly faster, averaging 1.4 seconds to return to stable tracking compared to 1.7 seconds for the two-wheel drive truck. Engineers who reviewed our data suggested this comes down to the additional weight over the front axle in the four-wheel drive truck, which provides marginally more front-end grip and steering authority when the trailer starts pushing the truck off its intended path. It's a small difference, but in a genuine sway emergency at highway speed, 0.3 of a second can matter. Resale value after 100,000 miles is worth mentioning because it factors into the true cost of ownership over the life of the truck. We had both trucks independently appraised at the conclusion of our test. The four-wheel drive truck appraised at approximately $4,200 higher than the two-wheel drive truck, even accounting for identical mileage, identical condition, and identical maintenance records. Four-wheel drive consistently commands a resale premium in the used truck market because buyers perceive it as more versatile and more capable, regardless of how it was actually used. When you factor this resale premium against the extra fuel cost, extra maintenance cost, and extra tire costs the four-wheel drive truck accumulated, the math shifts significantly. Total extra cost of ownership for the four-wheel drive truck over 100,000 miles came to $2,900 in fuel, plus $840 in driveline maintenance, minus $130 saved in tires, for a net extra operating cost of $3,610. Against that $4,200 resale premium, the four-wheel drive truck actually came out $590 ahead in total cost of ownership when you include what it's worth at trade-in time. So here's our clear winner, and it might not be the answer you expected going in. If you tow primarily on paved roads in moderate climates and rarely deal with mud, snow, or steep wet grades, the two-wheel drive F-150 is the better daily tool. It's cheaper to maintain, it burns less fuel every single mile you tow, and the extra 130 pounds of payload capacity can matter if you're already pushing close to your weight limits. But when we ran the full financial picture, including resale value, the four-wheel drive truck actually recovered nearly all of its extra operating costs and edged ahead by a narrow margin. Combine that financial recovery with the traction advantage we documented on wet ramps, muddy sites, and snowy mountain grades, and the four-wheel drive F-150 comes out as our overall winner for anyone whose towing takes them beyond smooth, dry pavement. If your towing is strictly highway hauling in a mild climate, don't let anyone talk you into paying for four-wheel drive you'll never use. But if there's any chance your trailer needs to go somewhere wet, steep, or unpaved, the data from our 100,000-mile side-by-side test says the four-wheel drive truck earns its keep. One thing this test made clear is that neither drivetrain is dramatically more reliable than the other over 100,000 towing miles. Both trucks completed the full distance without a breakdown, without a transmission failure, and without a single tow truck call. The differences we found were real and they were measurable, but they were differences of degree, not differences of capability. Ford built both of these trucks to handle serious towing duty, and our test proved that out. The decision between two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive ultimately comes down to where and how you tow, not which one is fundamentally better built. If you found this comparison helpful, subscribe to the channel because we have the full fuel log, maintenance receipts, and lab reports from this test available in a follow-up video for anyone who wants to dig into the raw numbers themselves. Drop a comment and let us know which drivetrain you are running and whether your real-world experience matches what we found over these 100,000 miles. Share this with anyone who is currently stuck deciding between two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive for their next tow rig. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.